Hello, career thought leaders. It's good to see you here today. And we are going to be talking about the new use of AI in recruiting, but also we're going to be talking about how this happens, that sometimes we get all these headlines and they make everybody all nervous. And you're like, well, wait a minute. That sounds familiar. I've been having a little bit of deja vu the last couple of weeks as we've been hearing a lot in the news about AI doing interviews and these types of things, because this is not new. Also have had some people reaching out to me and say, how is applicant tracking systems changing with AI? And newsflash, most applicant tracking systems, well, not most, but AI features have been available in applicant tracking systems since 2018 at least. I saw some things from iCIMS kind of talking about how their AI or their applicant tracking system has had AI features since 2018. They're kind of trying to say, hey, this isn't new. We know what we're doing. We've been using this for a while. So we're going to talk about the old that is now new again and some of the new data that we have so that you understand what your clients need to know about AI use in hiring and in some other things like promotions and salaries and all those types of things. So we've got a lot going on with AI today. I will share with you that our AI credentials series starts tomorrow. So if you want in-depth kind of step-by-step workflow for how to use AI in career coaching, resume and profile creation, job search coaching, interview coaching. We are doing that starting tomorrow. Got career and resume tomorrow, and then job search and interviewing next week. And love to see you there, give you that workflow. We've been teaching AI in career services since 2017, when it first started with Crystal and some of those other things. And then, of course, since ChatGPT came out in November of 2022, we've been teaching about it here and on our playlist of tech in career services. So if you haven't joined us on Friday in career services, make sure you do that next Friday. We won't be doing it this Friday because I will be in Gainesville. But if you want to learn more about AI, I would get into those credentials. So when we think about how recruiters are using AI, I do think it's important that we realize this isn't new. So we've been showing you videos since 2018, 2019, Ideal, some of the like Araya, Seek Out, Find Them, those technologies all came before ChatGPT, and they did use AI. Now, have they gotten better with the new language models that have been released? Maybe. We'll talk about maybe not. But they all were using these technologies throughout the recruiting funnel, from sourcing like Find Them and Araya and Seek Out, that will find people on the web that match a description, not just keywords, but a description of what the person is looking for. They use keywords. They also use pattern recognition, right? This is part of what AI means, is that machine learning, the pattern recognition, all of those pieces come in and make the decisions better. And it's easy for us to kind of be afraid of it or to think it's screening people out that aren't a good fit. But when you listen to Find Them, and it was Find Them that came and did a demo for us, that's not what the technologies are doing. They're good. They're doing pattern recognition. They're helping recruiters find people they wouldn't normally find because they've been able to expand their recruiting pool, right? You now can search internationally. You can search anywhere on the web instead of just going to that 2 or 3 schools of the career fairs that you've always gone to. It really widens the sourcing opportunities, and it widens opportunities for our clients, which is what we talk about in our digital branding class. How do you help clients build an online presence that will show up in those types of searches? Of course, much beyond that in terms of being more proactive in their search, but how do you get found? And it isn't just about a good LinkedIn profile, because in fact, a lot of these technologies can't search LinkedIn profiles because of the way LinkedIn's API, their backend, is set up. Well, that kind of comes and goes depending on the day of LinkedIn. But when you think about that AI use in that part of it, the sourcing, it's gotten better. It's gotten brought into more platforms, right? iCIMS and JobVite, which is now Employ, well, not all, but a lot of these tools that recruiters use. I'm not going to call them applicant tracking systems because it goes so much beyond that, right? But a lot of these tools that recruiters use to source candidates, they've used AI for about 7 years now. And yes, of course, it's always getting better and refined. Now, does it have issues with bias? Of course, yes, because the humans program the system. However, I have very little research that shows, is that AI bias worse than the human bias? We have a lot of data that shows how bad human bias is. And even when you think about human recruiters, not necessarily bias, but just limitations, where they travel, how they can search. So they were limited before these tools. Now the tools may be causing some other problems, but there's options and there's ways for them to work around that once they know the bias is there, which is what we talk about in our career work too, right? Once you know the bias is there, you can work around it. You can talk to the chat and you can make sure that you get what you want. So sourcing, yes, been there, done that, getting better. Screening. So this is where we get all of the hoopla around, applicant tracking systems, screening people out because they don't have the right keywords, all of that fear-based talk. And I will say it is fear-based talk because yes, the systems have the ability to do that. But what I hear by and large, and it makes sense, is recruiters don't use it to do that. Why? Because the systems aren't that great, right? They're still learning. They're still machines. And yes, they might score an applicant and rank them. And we've heard that from Cheryl Minnick, who's, in her university, seen that on the back end of systems where it can score and rank. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're eliminated. And very few hiring teams are going to eliminate you because of those systems. So this is interesting on the screening side. So there's been some work done by Martin Redstone. He did a presentation for us last year, and he's written this whole paper about language model use, the large language models, ChatGPT, et cetera, being used in the hiring process and how challenging that is, how it's not going well, right? These technologies that are built for it are marginal. The technology that is not built for it, like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, really not doing well. So he did some experiments where he was putting resumes into the system and seeing, if I put in a job description and a bunch of resumes, which candidate will it recommend? And the models almost never agreed. So each model would pick a different person. And it just isn't, it's not a valid way to use the tool. And he's trying to teach recruiters that, because, as a recruiter, they're just trying to do their best. They're trying to find the best candidate. They're trying to do it quickly because they've got 10 times more applications than they've ever had before. So he's trying to show, hey, this isn't accurate. It isn't working. It's not a good way to use the tool because I don't get the same results next time, because the models don't even agree. So what he found was, again, the models weren't agreeing, and that the hiring manager recruiter only agreed with the model 14% of the time. So that way of screening resumes is just not working. It'd be interesting to know how many recruiters are actually doing that, because I think you figure out pretty quickly that it's not working that well. However, what we do know, and always take this data with a grain of salt, this data comes from a resume organization whose data has been called into question before, but it is something. That managers are using AI to determine who gets promoted and fired. So this research, I'll drop this link in the chat. It won't come through to LinkedIn right away, but I'll come back up there and put it in LinkedIn. It is a study by study is probably not the right word, a survey. And they tell you how many people they asked. So 1,300 US managers with direct reports. And then they've got this nice graph. So they're using it to create training materials quite a bit, development plans, assess performance. Almost 50%, maybe a little bit more than 50% are using it to assess performance, create performance improvement plans, assess raise eligibility, promotion eligibility, layoff potential, and termination potential. So they are using these tools to do some things that maybe we wouldn't like them to do. But this is just good for us to know that, hey, if you are working in an organization, this might be happening. And how can you position yourself and share good information so that the hiring manager has the best information possible if they're going to be using these types of tools. Now, I will say that some folks that I know, some employees have used this for performance reviews. So if I put in, and Microsoft Copilot makes this really easy. It's one of the, we don't use it on the independent side very often, but on the corporate side, I can connect Microsoft Copilot to my emails, all of those things. And so I can actually have it go through and find times that my colleagues have sent me feedback and put that into my review. So there's some good uses of these tools, especially on the employee side, right? Gather your good information. If you use Gemini with a Google product, you can do the same thing, right? Have it go through your emails, or Copilot with Microsoft Outlook side. Go through emails, pull out that feedback, help you prepare for your review. On the employer side, on the manager side, interesting to see how many folks are using it to then determine some of these things. But it's one of those areas that we need to be aware of and thinking, how do we help people prepare for this? How do we help them communicate good information so that if that manager is plugging those kinds of things into an AI tool, they're at least giving it good data. We know the better data you put in, the better output you get. So it can be an opportunity to just explore. And you could go into ChatGPT and just say, what kinds of prompts might a manager be using to determine someone's raise eligibility, and just see what you get. Maybe managers will start to share those things, but I'm guessing they're not going to be doing a huge training on how they're using ChatGPT to do that, because it's not the best use of the tool. All right. So now we've talked about resume screening, right? The most individuals are looking at resumes that come through. Yes, they might give less time to ones that score lower if their system scores or ranks. Not all systems do, right? Or not all people turn that feature on. And so they might be doing that, but very few people are auto rejecting based on a score. They're usually auto rejecting, and not very often, based on answers to questions that they program in. So do you have X amount of experience? Do you have eligibility to work in this country? Those types of questions, if you answer the way that it is programmed to, it may give you an auto rejection. But based on a resume, based on resume formatting, we just need to keep dispelling that myth. The formatting especially is not getting in the way. The smarter these systems get, the less the formatting is going to get in the way. It's really about the words and your stories matching the requirements, and yes, the keywords. And then it's, are you a good fit? And yes, people are determining that really quickly. It might look like an auto rejection. I'll be so interested to see where that Workday case goes, where the person is claiming that they got auto rejections, because it may be that it was an auto rejection, but it also may have been a human working all hours of the day, because guess what? We're globally dispersed, and just looked at their resume in 5 seconds and said, nope, you're not a good fit. So, and those, of course, humans are biased as well. So how will they prove any of that's going to be very interesting. Yeah, Microsoft's doing some very interesting things with data. We talked about a few months ago, maybe, that Microsoft had released a internal product that for HR departments could score people on skills based on their work inside of their Microsoft products at work. So, everything you're doing in Outlook and Word and PowerPoint and projects and everything. And I have not seen too many more people talking about it, but I do know they are working on, or have early released that feature where it can collect all that data, give it to your HR department and say, this is these person's skills in X, Y, or Z. It's supposed to be meant to be a positive thing, right? Helping career path people in, helping identify skills where they can move people around inside of a company. But of course, we'll have to wait and see how that actually works. So when we think about how we're talking to these systems and how employers are talking to these systems, just important to know that they are using ChatGPT in addition to, and I say ChatGPT, I mean Claude, Gemini, whatever their, even Copilot, whatever their choice is, they're using that in addition to maybe some kind of hard-coded HR programs. So let's talk about interviewing and AI interviewing, because this has hit the news recently for some reason. I don't know why the news cycle circled back around to it, but this is just a flashback to 2018, 2019, when HireVue was posting. I even have a slide in one of my presentations where HireVue had posted in 2018 about their facial recognition and all of this stuff. And they had a video where the person got a score and it's all cool. And then in 2020, they posted, wait a minute, sorry, we decided not to use facial recognition anymore because guess what? That creates more bias. However, there are still quite a few products on the market that use facial recognition and scoring. But what they're really worried about, what they're really scoring, is a skills assessments. They're asking people specific questions in those one-way interviews and score them as a skills assessment, not just an interview, right? So they're transcribing your answers and they're scoring, do you have these skills or not? Are you displaying these skills or not? Some are still analyzing for, your tone, your approachability, some of those things we talked about in terms of sentiment analysis. So some are still scoring for those. But then the new thing that they're scoring for, we just were talking about this with a gentleman from Video Bio Recruiter, company out of Canada that's been around for a long time. We started working with them early, 2010, 2012 or so, doing video bios. And then they got into the video recruiting piece a while ago. And so he was talking about how the systems also flag if you look off the screen, because it's like, oh, you're looking at notes or you're looking at a different monitor, and they're not kicking you out for that, but it is putting a flag on that timestamp for the recruiter to go back and look what was going on at that time, right? Did they look away? Are they using ChatGPT while they're interviewing, et cetera, which I would not recommend. Final round, sorry, is not a great idea for doing while you're live on the interview, where you can get the answers from somebody else. But yeah, it's that opportunity to just check and make sure. And he talked about the identification verification that goes on at the beginning, where you have to show your ID next to your picture so they know it's really you. It's very interesting how the technology has evolved, right? No, we're not scoring your facial expressions anymore, but we are looking for that. Are you you? Can you verify your identity? You're not an avatar. I'm going to flag when you look off the screen, and the recruiter can go back and look at that timestamp to see what was going on. So there's some advancements and changes going on in those systems. And there's also kind of continuing increasing use. We've seen more people talk about assessments and skills assessments. And again, one of the main skills assessments they're talking about are these one-way interviews with specific questions that get at specific skills, so that, reportedly they have a more objective analysis because they've got the same information from everyone. I still worry about all the bias wrapped up in those. And of course, now you're saying, okay, if someone's articulate, they're going to score better than if someone's really nervous or whatever. So for those of you who are career services providers out there, this is something people need help with. Whether the resume goes away or not, I still think is at least a decade out, but increasingly people will need to know how to articulate their stories in different ways. In writing, can't sound like ChatGPT, maybe even have to say that you didn't use ChatGPT, like the federal government has moved to. If you're going for their high-end positions, now you have to sign this thing that says you did not use large language models to answer the questions. We may see that from more employers, right? More questions, more assessments, more one-way interviews where you have to be able to articulate your stories with the skills that the job is looking for. And that's something people need help with. Connecting the dots, telling the story, practicing the story, because everybody wants to do it off bullet points. That's not going to work when you have a one-way interview. You are going to have practiced and be ready to tell those stories. And that's something that they need help with. And someone's asking if you can ask questions, please. Yep, drop your question in the chat. It does pop up here, so I can see that if you want to drop that in. Okay, so interviews, that shift, growth, focusing on skills, scoring for the skills. Yes, able to score maybe the facial recognition, the sentiment analysis, even from your words, but also thinking about when you're on, like he talked about how it starts recording even before they press record. And so if you are on camera, if you're on that site, knowing that you're on, knowing that they're looking, and how are you going to manage that process to come out. Now, here's the thing. You might have job seekers saying, well, I don't want to jump through those hoops. If they're having me do a one-way interview, I'm out. I've got to tell you that you're going to be eliminating yourself from good positions. It's not just weird companies that are doing this. This is companies, when you listen to the recruiters talking about this is companies that want to try to get the best person, to avoid what they see as resume bias. Now, again, I think this other part adds in some more bias of its own, but they're doing this for good reasons. They want to improve the hiring process. They want to get a better look at the candidates than just their resume. And so if your candidates are automatically eliminating these companies just because they're making them do a one-way interview, I don't think that's a great thing. It's not a negative. It's not like, oh, I have to do all these things before I get to a human. No, they're trying to make the process more fair. They're trying to get more information from people before they decide. And a lot of times now they're doing these one-way interviews before they even make any decisions. So everybody who's applying and who is willing goes through that process, and then the first decision is made with all of that information, the one-way interview transcript, the scores, whatever that might look like on their end. And these platforms, they're growing, and they're trying to adapt to different types of job openings, because of course it kind of started in the tech realm with some of those assessments and software program, those types of things. But we're really seeing that expansion, and they're trying to move away from the resume being the only tool, or in some cases, rare at this point, the resume being the initial tool. So it's changing, and it's going to continue changing. They will disclose. So Lily's saying, yeah. So they do disclose, probably in something the candidate might not be reading that well, that how the system works. But as soon as you get on the site, like before you start the official interview, he claimed that they were recording. I'm guessing that you give permission for that earlier in the process, even if you may not be paying attention to that's what it's saying, that's the directions that you're giving. So this was Video Bio Recruiter, but from what I understand, Lily, it's not uncommon for the platforms to start recording as soon as the candidate gets into the platform. I don't know. Maybe some other recruiters will share, but that's what we heard from him, and it didn't sound like it was a unique to their platform kind of thing. So when we think about how this process works, and then you get to the decision-making piece, which we looked at, yes, some people are using this for decisions. They're using large language models for decisions. I don't think you're going to see a huge amount of that in recruiting, especially with experienced recruiters. They might be using it at the beginning. They're using it perhaps to score, but then they're stepping in with that human element. The hiring manager is stepping in, of course, with those top few candidates. And so the selection piece is rare. It's very rare that an AI is doing selection. AI is gathering information. AI might be sorting, perhaps, scoring and sorting. But you're not going to see, again, very many AI tools eliminating applicants or making those hiring decisions. Is it maybe some places? Sure, where they're maybe experimenting with it, or they've got a really high volume of applicants. But I don't see that being very common in the stuff that I'm reading and listening to. AI is helping them kind of with what we talk about it being a good tool to do: information gathering, research, asking questions, maybe doing some help with that interview, maybe even scoring that. But then you've got the humans that are stepping in and reading, reviewing, seeing if they agree, especially now that we're still highly in this experimental piece of that, even though some of the technologies have been around for a while. Yeah, Lily, the large language model report was from Martin Redstone. The talk about the systems that record before you get on was not. That was from Video Bio Recruiter. But the large language model, I can't remember what the rest of the title is, but the large language model report, Martin Redstone shared in his LinkedIn posts a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. He had this large language model use in recruiting report. Very good. Let's see if he can come back to our group and share some of the stuff that he's doing. He presented at our last Career Jam in 2024. So we'll see if we can get him back to do something here for us shortly. So as we look at this, here's the thing, bottom line. The human interaction still matters. The part that recruiters are trying to use AI to do is kind of the same thing small businesses are trying to use AI to do. And it's that initial information gathering, the scheduling, the administration, so that they have the time to step in the human elements. And the more that our clients can connect with them in the human elements, or even like in their answers, in their preparation, the more they can work in their human stories, the more memorable they'll be, the more they'll stand out from all the other AI generated content, right? So we want to think about, yes, you use these tools to a point. You use them to do the research. You use them to create the framework. You use them to identify which stories matter. But then you say, okay, I'm going to take all that time savings and I'm going to put it into thinking about and formulating my human stories of success, of skill demonstration, all of the things that are relevant, because that's what's going to make me memorable. It's going to help connect. It's going to score well in these systems, is when I really think through and can demonstrate the skill connected to, of course, results or outcomes. That's what we're looking for. So don't miss that piece. Help your clients not miss that piece, and really promote that is the differentiator you bring. Yes, they can do all this research. They can have the tools do these things. But when it comes right down to it, if they are not able to articulate their stories with specifics that connect to the things the employer cares about, they won't rise to the top in resume reviews, in interviews, etc. The time of like the AI keyword matched resume doing anything for you are gone. Everybody's got one. And that's not necessarily even how they're hiring anymore. They're going out, they're building relationships, they're looking in different ways. And yes, you still want to use those tools to make sure your materials have the right stories, and then the right keywords, but they have to be your stories, because it's so obvious when they're not, whether you're in the interview or whether you're on your resume. So career services providers out there, keep doing the great work that you're doing, helping people find those authentic stories. If you're interested in how you can weave AI through that process to add value where it does and save time for where that human piece has to step in, again, we're doing our sessions. We quarterly do our AI in career services micro credentials. We're doing our third quarter this week, and we'd love to see you there. We will see you on next Tuesday for another Trend Tuesday Live. Probably be looking at some labor market data, some interesting things that came out in the June labor market data, and what that means for us and our clients. If you have other topics you'd like to cover, other ideas, please let me know, and we'll see you for the next Trend Tuesday Live. Thank you, everyone.